Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, Associate Editor of HLUX, and I'm here with...
Rob H. This is AV Rant, the show where we answer your questions about home theater and all things audio-video. And Tom, are you feeling any better this week? Because man, oh man, were you sick last week?
I was pretty sick last week. I was not a lot of fun, and I hung up. I hung out for about 5 minutes and said, I'm going to bed, which is exactly what I did. I was a disaster last week. I didn't think I was going to make it, but antibiotics kind of cleared everything up, and now I'm back to my normal angry AV ranty self, though my voice is still a little bit hoarse. So
okay,
there's that. Let's see. Before we get started with the podcast today, do we have any news or things to discuss?
Well, there's been some sad news over in Microsoft land. Apparently, they're going to be laying off about 18,000 employees, the vast majority of those being people that they absorbed from Nokia when they bought Nokia's mobile division. So apparently there's about 14,000 people over there who are redundant in their job position and will be being downsized. But more on the AV side, Xbox Entertainment, which is basically the initiative they had set up to start creating original content for the Xbox as part of their Xbox video service, putting out original shows, including things like Halo TV series and documentaries and stuff. Well, the ones that were already in production, those will be coming out, but the rest of the whole thing is just being shut down. So we're seeing like everybody and their dog starting to produce original content, and Xbox is like, nope, we're already done.
We did that. We're finished. Thanks anyways. Gotta go. I'll tell you what, the Guild. Remember the Guild? I mean, it's now on Netflix. You can stream the entire thing on Netflix. And when it was on Xbox Live, I loved watching that. Like, I was pretty into it for a while. I talked about it on the podcast a while back. I think I kind of jumped the rails the last couple of seasons. But for the most part, I mean, it made, what's her name? Felicia Day, is that her name?
Oh, yeah.
Made her a star. I mean, she did the whole...
She was already kind of a star.
She was, but it all happened at the same time. There was like the Dr. Horrible, and then she did that, and she started having guest appearances on different TV shows and stuff like that. And, you know, I kind of thought that was kind of cool of them. And then all of a sudden, no, we're done with that. Microsoft is never... Well, let's just say they have a history of bad decisions. So, you know.
Yeah, well, yet again, I mean, they just had what a lot of people called like a corporate restructuring not even a year ago, and then now they have their new CEO, and he's taking over, and I guess he's got a new vision of where he wants to take Microsoft. So things are being restructured yet again, and unfortunately, it meant a lot of people lost their jobs. But yeah, anyway, that's been the news. What a happy way to start off the podcast.
Yeah, I guess what they were thinking is that they'd buy Nokia and become like an Apple. And then they decided that they couldn't do that because, you know, buying something that you don't start by buying something that's not doing well to begin with, and then you know what I mean. I guess Google did the same thing. They bought Motorola, and I think they kind of stripped it of all the patents they wanted, and
that
they
is
sold
all
the rest
they wanted. They never even released like a Motorola Nexus or anything, which everyone figured was going to happen. Nope. Just absorbed their patents.
We got what we wanted. Gotta go.
Yep.
Sorry. They were dying anyways. Yeah, whatever. All right. So, this week we have Leighton to thank for being a podcast supporter. He supported the podcast by going to avrant.com and clicking on the buy us a cup of coffee. With that money, we keep the podcast going, pay for all of our hosting fees and stuff like that, which has been great that we've now got support for the podcast. That's really helping out. Eventually, we're going to quit our jobs and do this full time.
That would be kind of awesome, but that is not likely to happen in the near future.
We are so comically far away from that at this point. Like we couldn't even reduce our hours by an hour a week right now. But the podcast is self-sustaining at this point, so keep it up, guys, and we will keep bringing you the podcast because we do it mostly for the love of doing it. So thank you, Leighton, for being our listener.
Thank you, Leighton.
For those of you that are interested, we do answer all of your AV questions, even the ones I don't want to answer that Rob keeps putting on the list anyways, except for Gary, who we just bump. I didn't get a response from Gary about that, but I was cracking up all week about bumping Gary. I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm hilarious, and that's probably a character failing on my part. I did get a comment from one of our listeners that, for the love of God, will I get a better camera? And considering the number of people that watch this podcast a week, it's not quite in the AV Rant budget yet. I will talk to Harmony about maybe sponsoring a camera for us, but I still have to review their remote, which I'm going to be doing the Harmony Ultimate. So the Logitech owns them. The Logitech makes the camera that everybody says I should get, which is with a C390 or something like that, or 190.
See, I thought that I was going to put that Harmony Ultimate review in like the rundown for today, and then I looked at all the questions and feedback we have. I was like, oh, nope, we've got lots again. So yeah, I will save that for a week when we don't have as many.
I think we're doing it next week. I'd like to get it done. I don't like to sit on reviews for too long, even though we've got lots of stuff to talk about. So we will talk about that next week. If anybody's got any comments about their Harmony Ultimate or other Harmony products, or has questions about the Harmony Remote, the Ultimate Remote, make sure you drop me a line at tom@avrant.com. You can also contact Rob at avrant.com. We are on Twitter. Rob is at FirstReflect. I'm at avrant_Tom. And if you want to comment on the podcast, you can go to the website, or you can go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast. It's all one word, and leave us a note over there, which people do constantly. We're also on G+, I guess, technically. We record every Monday night.
Remember to check those.
Yeah, we do check those. If you check us out on, you have to friend me on G+, and then I will add me to a circle, and then if I don't have no idea who you are, you go into my listeners circle, and listeners get announced that we are recording. When we were recording on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, we record for a couple hours till the podcast is over, and then we have a little hangout afterwards where I invite the entire universe of. No, actually, I only invite listeners now, because we had weird people breathing heavy showing up and then leaving when they found out that it wasn't. I don't know what they expected to find in our room, but it wasn't obviously it. So I now only invite listeners, and so if you want to get invited to that, that's how you do it, and then we max out at 10. So this week we have a ton of questions and comments. We've got some stuff from Will about renting a projector, Michael about botting him out an SVS sub, Nick about humidity, who we talked about humidity because of that was Nick last week as well with humidity.
No, it was
right?
Damon who asked. He actually asked like 2 weeks ago, and I missed it because it was on Twitter and it was a conversation, and I forgot to put it in the week.
Oh, there you go. So Damon was talking last week about humidity, and Nick wants to chime in. Jeff and Rohan want to talk about Odyssey. Efrain and Jason have more to say about surround music recordings and DACs. Jason, well, nope, that's the same. It's the same thing. What is that? Oh, it just was highlighted. Another Jason. I think it's a different Jason. We have so many Jasons. Jason wants to talk about refurbished items in B stock. Last week, Carlos wanted to know our favorite speakers, and Jared wanted us to list some of our favorite demo material, which I am resistant to, but apparently we're doing it anyways because it's on the list, and it's high enough up that I won't be able to skip it. So, questions and discussion topics for this week. These are the newer questions. David, different David, sent us an article that describes why speakers could be a lot better but aren't. It's a very long article. We will be talking about it probably in depth. Infinite Gary wants to know about HDCP 2.2. We may or may not bump him.
Yeah, we might have to bump that. Yeah,
might have to bump that one. That might not make it. Ashley asks about the F.LUX software for displays. What is this? Al? Is that Al or AI?
It's Al. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because I was like, oh my God, Skynet asked this question. Al wants to talk about isobaric subwoofers. Isobaric. That sounds like something that you use to measure the atmosphere, but it's not. Toby is looking for a new receiver. Jason found a motorized projection screen at a really low price, wants to know our opinion. Raul is trying to decide which $500 projector to buy. Ooh, that's hard. Cesar wants our thoughts on that on the new Emotiva XMC-1, which has finally started shipping.
Gosh, I hope we get to that. I don't
know that we will. This is a lot of questions. It's a different Nick. Maybe has questions about high-res audio playback, flat speaker wire, and acoustic treatments. Eliezer talks about absolute phase and phase inversion switches. He also has some stuff about DACs. Travis wants to know whether or not the Pioneer MCACC is worth replacing the mic he lost, so he can't use it.
Well, yeah, kind of a critical part of it.
The critical, we can't do it without that. Chances of us getting through all these questions today? I think it's a goose egg, but we will try. Gary, your head's on the block already. All right. So once again, Leighton was our listener of the week. Do we have anything else to talk about before we go on?
No, let's jump right into it.
All right. Will's running a projector. It's if you don't know who Will is, you haven't been paying attention to the podcast. Will is Liz's husband. Liz is was or former Rob, I guess, because we've kind of given up on finding the girl for this podcast right now. But for right now, Rob is the new Liz, and Liz was the new Dina. So Liz was my podcast partner for a very long time. She's very, very much missed, but yes. we are forging on without her. Will was looking to rent a projector. Was finding that most of the pricing was between $200 and $400, which meant he could buy like a used one for the same price. And because this is like it's sort of a business class projector. It was not a real high end one that he was looking to rent, but he found an Epson 3010 for $116, including shipping, for an entire weekend. So if anyone else is ever looking, we will post the link up on our website, avrant.com, and I imagine we'll do it on Facebook as well. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And they have more than just the Epson 3010.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one that fits what Will was looking for, but they have other ones. So that is not a terrible way to try things out, particularly like if you want to decide what screen size you want to get or what kind of throw ratio you have, how far away the projector needs to be from the screen to get the size of screen that you want, that type of thing, before you order your actual projector. So I hadn't really thought about that before, but that could be quite useful, to be honest.
I don't know, man. For $116, if you're really looking at a specific projector, I think you could spend less on return shipping. If you end up buying from one of those places that have a return policy, just say, it doesn't work for me, and send it back. So, yeah, balance it out. Check it out. See where it goes. All right, Michael. Says he's bottomed out a subwoofer, an SVS subwoofer. Last week, Rob, and I've made the same comment, but Rob's made it more than I have, that SVS subwoofers will never bottom out. But Michael says his did. Now, to be clear here, his is not one of the newer SVS subs. So it is a sub from 2003. It is a 2039 PC Plus, which is a... That's a cylinder one, right? It's a ported cylinder.
It was the middle one.
Yeah, it was because before it was, I don't even think it was NSD before. It was something else, and then there was the Plus.
ISD at one point.
Oh, ISD.
Yeah.
I forgot about ISD.
Yeah, they did have that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
And
so this was
old. Weird naming conventions before too. So.
All right. So what he's described was a sound. He described it as a bazooka being fired underwater. So it sounded like whoa, 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 whoa. So he's kind of, it's kind of a half statement, like, hey, you guys are wrong, and hey, is this really what a bottoming out sounds like? Well, first of all, obviously, so SVS has changed a lot over the years. It's 11 years ago, and that time they have upgraded their technology, and their new subs do not bottom out. Okay, their old subs might have, but to be clear, the sound of a sub bottoming out is the sound of metal clanging against metal.
Yup.
That is the sound. So if it doesn't sound like you took two metal bars and smacked them together, you are not hearing bottoming out. Okay, so that whoop, 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 whatever you heard, that is a terrible sound. I'm sure it is not meant to be made by that subwoofer, and you should probably, whatever you did to make it do that, don't do that again. But it's not bottoming out.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, the reason that the current lineup of SVS subwoofers cannot bottom out is because the new amplifiers that they're using use digital signal processing and actually control the signal so that it won't ever allow the woofer to move in and out so much that it bottoms out. And bottoming out happens when the woofer is moving in and out so much that the voice coil or the pole piece that is actually behind the woofer and is the thing that the electrical current runs through and makes it move back and forth, that thing is moving so far that it's actually smacking into the magnet behind it. And that is why it sounds like it's going clang, clang, clang. So that wasn't what was happening with Michael's. His sounds, to me, what he was describing, like the voice coil was jumping out of the magnetic gap, which is what happens is you can think of the voice coil as either being longer than the width of the magnet that it's acting against, in which case they call that an overhung voice coil, or the voice coil can be narrower than the width of the magnet, which case they call that underhung. And what happens is, in either case, if the voice coil moves beyond the range of the magnet, then you have jumped the magnetic gap, and that's when it gets this really crazy, like whoomp 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 sound, because it's supposed to be moving out, and then it jumps too far, and then it comes back, and the signal's already moving the other direction, and it just makes horrible, horrible distortion, and can damage your subwoofer. So, yes, what he was describing is terrible, but still not bottoming out. Crazy.
Still not bottoming out. There you go. See, you need a new sub. I think that's the moral of the story. Is that you need another one, something bigger, more power. More power! All right, Nick. Nick is following up on our discussion about humidity. He sent us a very long email about the humidity in the basement of his Midwest home, which he says is a real problem in that part of the U.S. about March to October. That's like half the year, right? Am I not right about that? It's like half the year.
Yep.
He had some HVAC work done, and when they brought everything up to code, it actually made the humidity in his basement much worse. Part of that work was sealing up a large air return that was improperly placed in the basement. Okay, so since his basement was pleasant and dry before the HVAC work, he believes that simply having enough air return ducts in the basement should be enough to keep humidity under control. In the meantime, he's been using a Frigidaire brand dehumidifier that got top marks from Consumer Reports. Which is, I think, a perfectly valid way to go look for stuff like that. You know, I've gotten in heated discussions with people who are really into audio, who are like, yeah, but they recommend Bose, so, you know, they're crap. I'm like, okay. If you are really into anything, if you're really into whatever it is, cars or power tools or dehumidifiers, you're not going to like what Consumer Reports recommends. But you have to admit that whatever Consumer Report recommends, while you would never recommend it, isn't necessarily a horrible thing. Might be overpriced, might be overhyped, but it certainly is. Like, I would never recommend Bose to somebody under any circumstances, but the fact is that if you listen to Bose and you've never listened to anything else, you think they sound good. There you go. I bought a drill, like a corded drill. It's a Milwaukee drill off of Consumer Reports, and I've never regretted that decision for a minute. Could I have gotten something cheaper and better? Maybe. But it's certainly a very robust drill that's done everything I've needed over the years. Now, I've got friends who are really into power tools, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's okay, but you could have gotten, and then You know, it's what it is. All right, anyways. He says it works. So he's got a Frigidaire brand. That was a little aside there. Frigidaire brand dehumidifier that got top marks from Consumer Reports. He says it works very well and it's very efficient, although it is very loud, which we kind of suggested. Yeah. So for Damien from last week, he suggests that he could run a Frigidaire unit in the theater whenever he isn't watching anything, and then go turn the dehumidifier off for 2 hours or so while the theater is in use. Should I keep going, or do you want to comment on these before you want to do them all together? It kind of seems like these all goes together.
All together, yeah.
So he's looking into the dead vent that Rob mentioned last week, but he's concerned about whether it would provide enough circulation within the theater to be really a viable solution. So if you remember the dead vent, and if you went and looked at the website, and somebody suggested last week that I could use G+ to put images up on our videos thing, and no, we don't get enough people. I see 1,000 people watching this video at some point. I will start putting stuff. Right now we're getting like 100, 150 if we're lucky. And frankly, you guys are, your Google foo is strong. So a dead vent basically is you have two rooms side by side, okay, and in one room you put the dehumidifier, and then in the other room you put the home theater. Then there's a long, essentially baffled tube to draw the hot air out, and then another opening at the bottom to basically pull the cooler, less humid air back in. So you put the humidifier and you let it work in the room by itself, and you close the door and you let the natural circulation work by itself. So basically, that's kind of what he had before. When he had
Yep.
that return air duct in his basement that they took out, that's what he had.
Yep.
The top of the house was dehumidifying everything, and it was sucking the air through. When they patched it up, it turned more into a normal basement, which apparently is humid 50% of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean as to whether the dead vent would be sufficient, that's just a matter of you need to figure out based on the size of the theater room how many cubic feet of air you need to move through there per hour or per minute or however whatever units they want to use. But I mean it just comes down to a cubic feet of air per whatever unit of time. There'll be recommendations for that based on the level of humidity and the size of the room, and then you just need to have a large enough or maybe you'll need 2 or 3 intake and 2 or 3 output vents. You might just need that for the amount of air that you have to move through there, or larger, more powerful fans or whatever it is. But there's no reason why it can't work. It's just an air exchange. There's nothing particularly special about a dead vent other than it uses altering the size of the vents and using a specific type of fan that's very, very silent. So I mean, this it's a very common thing to do an air exchange as a form of air ventilation. So that's all it is. Just have to work out how many cubic feet of air you need to move.
Yeah, so it should work. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. I wouldn't. Yeah, it's just a matter of getting your components right too. And you got to understand too. Naturally, these things are going to circulate. Whether you put any fans in there or not, it's gonna circulate. And if you think about it, if you put a heater in one room and put a grate between that room and the next room, there's going to be some heat that's going to make its way over, and there's going to be some cool air that's going to make its way back. It's just the natural properties of of entropy, essentially. These things separate, spread out. So adding the fan increases the speed that these things happen. But even if you didn't, you took all that humidity out of that room, it would naturally want to circulate into the other room where it was more humid. So yeah, just work out the math and you'll be fine. It should work. I'm curious as what David ends up doing. I'm not particularly a fan of the 2 hour of the get the room so like Sahara dry and then go in there and turn on your projector for 2 hours and then get progressively less comfortable as you're watching your movie. In Australia, our home theater, I say that lightly, the room that we watched TV in was was almost as far away from the AC as it could be, and it had one of those ductless systems way in the other side of the house. So when we first start watching TV, it would be fine in there, and then it would just steadily get hotter from the projector, and it was after 2 hours. It was, especially during the summer, it was miserable in there. Now, on the other side, during the winter, when it was cold, I would turn on the TV because it would get nice and toasty warm in there eventually. So, it went both ways. All right, Jeff and Rohan. Over, I guess, well, Jeff on G Plus and Rohan, I guess, over email,
Yes.
are weighing in on this whole Odyssey thing. Now, Rob has made the claim that he has found that if he runs Odyssey, he sometimes gets skewy results. But if he turns the volume to 0, the reference volume to 0, before plugging in the measurement microphone and running Odyssey, it makes a difference and he gets a better result. And I thought that was more in his head than because I've run Odyssey multiple times, and each time it comes out a little bit different.
Right.
And if you think about it, well, yeah, it's going to come out. Maybe there's some outside noise. Maybe the microphone picked up something a little weird. Maybe you placed the microphone slightly differently from one time to the other. All these other things can weigh in. But Rob swears that the 0, not swears, but thinks that the 0, setting it to 0 makes a difference. Well, Jeff and Rohan both tried it, and they both say that it made a big difference as well. And I think you're all wrong.
Yeah. I know Tom might be thinking that I'm like gonna pump my fist in the air and say that I'm right or something. No. I'm not happy about this because there are so many things where on this very podcast or on forums I'm saying like stuff is being imagined or it's a placebo effect or there's really no reason to believe that this is happening. This is one of those cases, except for the difference is it really costs you absolutely no money. There isn't any big like downside to doing it. It's like it's a pretty easy step to just turn your volume to 0 and then plug in your mic. So it's not like it's going to hurt anybody or cost anybody any money. But I don't like the fact that it does seem to make a difference sometimes, and I can't
It
really
shouldn't
explain why. I
play
mean,
the test tones any louder either when you're doing it. The test tone should be at
no,
the same volume.
the only explanation I've ever seen, and this is a speculation of an explanation, is just that the things to do with setting the levels of your speakers and the distance of your speakers and all that, even though that all takes place during the Odyssey setup or during the YPOW setup if it's Yamaha or the MC ACDC setup if it's Pioneer, even though it takes place, Odyssey itself, the part that Denon, Marantz, or Onkyo is licensing, that doesn't do the speaker levels or the speaker distances or the crossover frequency. That is all done by the manufacturer. So some people have sort of speculated that when you have the master volume set somewhere else, it's kind of saying, well, that's sort of the level you want your volume to be at, so that's where we're going to set sort of reference volume. And then when you do something like activate dynamic EQ with Odyssey, now it doesn't really know where reference volume was supposed to be, whereas if you zero it out, it's like, all right, I know that's supposed to be reference volume, and now if you're anywhere below 0, I know how to alter the curves of the EQ when you've got dynamic EQ turned on. And it seems to work. So yeah, look, I don't know what to say here. I'm not happy about it, but at the same time, I'm like, it really isn't a gigantic hassle to just turn your volume to 0 before
I
you
will
start.
say that while I believe
So,
it's bogus, and that
yeah.
that this is not actually what's happening, uh, I'm gonna if I had a Odyssey, if I ran Odyssey right now, I would set mine to 0 too.
Yeah.
You know what? Baseball players do all kinds of weird stuff, right? It cost me less than that. So there you go.
Yes. Yeah.
That's basically what I'm going to say about that. Efrain over on Facebook and Jason have a couple things to say about surround music recordings and DACs. After we talked about whether 2L surround sound music offerings were really recorded in 7.1 or just extrapolated from some other microphone setup, Efrain let us know that 2L actually provides a link to a Facebook photo album for every music album they record, and they provide images of the layout of the musicians and where the microphones were placed. They do use 8 microphones, 7.1 so sometimes, and the 9.1 RO 3D mixes seem to be extrapolated by the mixer, though there doesn't seem to be any images of a 5.1 microphone setup with 4 height mics. So there's some examples, and you can go check those out. I guess that's cool.
Well, I'll tell you what kind of made me shake my head a little bit was that the majority of the ones that were either 5.1 mics or 7.1 mics, they had it in the arrangement where the microphones were in the middle and the musicians were arranged around the microphones. In other words, this is an on-stage perspective, as though you are, because you're listening to what the microphones are receiving, so it's as though you are embedded in the middle of the musicians rather than the perspective of you being out in the audience, which is what I personally prefer. I prefer the reproduction of me sitting in the audience of a concert music hall and having the musicians up on stage all in front of me, and then the surround channels are really just reproducing reflections and ambience. But that gives you the sensation of being transported to the location where the recording was being made. So I'm not a particularly huge fan of the on-stage perspective, and that's what most of these seem to be from 2L.
Well, I'm not. I've heard both. The downside of doing the audience thing is that you end up with basically 4 speakers if you're doing 7.1. 4 speakers that are doing almost nothing the entire time, and 3 speakers up front that are doing most of the work. They just provide that your surround and your surround backs end up just sort of providing a little bit of ambiance. And I think people go, why am I listening to a 7.1 surround sound recording and I've got 4 speakers that aren't doing anything? So they want to give those speakers something to do, so they embed them. Well, I agree with you. I find it distracting to find an instrument coming from behind me or a specific voice coming from behind me. Unless it makes sense for it to be that way. I also find it distracting when they truly record something in stereo. And I've heard 5.1 mixes this way, where like the guitarist will be in the front left speaker and the bass player be in the front right speaker. I'm like, cut it out. Just, pan that a little bit so it sounds a little bit more centered, and it just sort of messes with me a bit. So
Yeah, it can sound artificial if it's
it's what it
done
does,
too
because
much.
you know what,
Yeah.
when you're when you're actually in the place, it doesn't sound like the guy on the left is coming from your left and the guy on your right's coming from the right. It sounds like it's all kind of coming at you together because there's speakers everywhere in those places. And yeah, there are some left and right cues, but it's not that obvious. And putting everything in one speaker kind of bothers me. So I'm sort of with you on that. I don't necessarily like the on stage, though it can work. And I'd be interested to hear some of the stuff and see how well it works with them, because it looked like a lot of the stuff, at least the ones I clicked on, were like choral. So there was a ton of people up front
Yeah.
singing and stuff, and I don't know. We'll see how that works out. Jason also wanted to remind us that some of the DTS music DVDs, which I have a good number of, and I really like them. They don't make them anymore, but I really like them. They were also many of them were DTS, DVDAs, and they had a PCM channel track on them. But some of the DTS ones, they would have DTS ES 6.1, which is not the most useful thing in the world, but at least it's more than 5.1.
It's that mono rear channel.
Yay, mono. That's what we always are looking for. Anyway, so we had 6.1 for about a year before we all went, well, that's stupid, and went straight to 7.1. So, and then now we bumped up to 9.2 point stupid. Okay, and Efrain wanted to let us know about the Geek Out USB headphone amp and hi-rez DAC. This is a Kickstarter program, and apparently Efrain must have been one of the backers because he seems to have one. And he has commented that the one thing that really struck him was that the noise floor is super low, which means you plug. Basically, what this is it looks like a really oversized USB stick. Okay, it's big enough that it's going to cover at least one thing to either side of your USB port. Okay, so you
Unless
may want to
use
get
a little pigtail attachment.
You might want to use a pigtail on this one, unless you think that's going to make a difference in the sound.
Oh God!
No. Come on, there's somebody out there going, you can't use a pigtail. That'll mess everything up. Because if you watch the video on the Geek Out, whatever the heck it is, website, they're talking about how they've spent all this money on video on all these components in here, and they use a $4 or something $4 headphone jack. You're going to use that? I'm like, really? Because how much do you think they spent on that USB port? But anyways, so some of the important things is it's $200. You can kind of pre-order it now. It's not shipping yet, but it's a $200 for the standard model. Which are meant for headphones that are 100 ohms or less impedance, and then I think it's $50 to bump up to the next level, and another $50 above that to go to the next level for these higher powered versions. It can handle. All right, whatever. It can handle 384 is that kilohertz? I guess.
Yeah, 384 kilohertz.
32-bit. PCM, which literally does not exist, and DSD 128, which is 5.4 megahertz, which is the DSD side of this. It can handle this. It's a combination DAC headphone amp. It's got two 3.5 millimeter plugs on it, so you can now plug two headphones into this thing instead of just one. So, what's your take, Rob?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as the whole 384 32-bit PCM thing, I mean, it does exist in the sense that there is like audio editing software and people are using it now, but what they're doing is upsampling what they recorded, because we have no digital audio recorders or microphones that are getting frequencies that high. 192 kilohertz? Are we worried about capturing that high of a frequency? In any case, they're upsampling it so that they can manipulate the signal digitally without destroying the waveform in any sense, and then normally they downmix that back into a regular format. But some people are saying, nope, just give me exactly what came out of the editing software, even though it was upsampled from what was originally recorded. So yeah, this thing will play it anyway is the point. No matter what sampling rate and bit depth was used, this thing will play it back. So okay, it's cool in that sense. But I mean, I do like the mention specifically about the noise floor because honestly, that is the only thing I care about when it comes to headphone amplifiers. Because like I said, I mean the headphone amplifiers and separate DACs are the one place where there's still so much ridiculous misinformation and hype and so many claims that people are believing about what a difference it's going to make. And it's, I don't like that side of it, but the one thing that does stand out to me is noise floor because I can plug my headphones into a lot of different headphone jacks on a lot of different devices and hear varying levels of hiss. While it's just sitting there idle, definitely some of them hiss, and I really like one that is as close to silent as possible. So that part I appreciate, and $200 isn't vastly more expensive than the other ones we've been talking about. So on that alone, I might be interested in it.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it's got two headphone outputs, which I think is I find that convenient, and maybe you don't, but I even in my real life, in my non-professional AV life, I've had people over and we were both watching something together, and our wives are we were watching climbing because I'm a climber and that's what I watch, climbing competitions. So I was watching a climbing competition right before I started this. So let's just watch Adam Ondra flail off of something, which was disappointing because I was really excited about seeing him climb, but whatever. But in your defense, Rob, if that, not that you need any, but my favorite climber is a Canadian. Sean McCall is my favorite climber. So if I have, I'm definitely Team McCall. I don't know why I'm
that's
telling
in my
This.
defense.
I don't know.
In defense of Canadians.
I should drink. I would at least have an excuse. I should have something to drink. Anyhow, we were watching climbing. Our wives were talking in the room. We were both wearing headphones, and I could plug them into one DAC. And then the DAC had the one I was using, the Emotiva Stealth. It has one single volume input, but he was wearing these headphones that I'm wearing right now, which is the V-Motive, the CrossFit 100s, and they've got the inline mic with the volume control, so he could change his volume so that it was the right volume for him. It's perfect. It was great. So I do like that. But if you watch the video on the Geek Out USB website, him every time he talks about how much bass it has, I want to punch him in the face. That just, I mean, like, okay, so are you trying to tell us that it's giving us exactly what was on there, or are you trying to tell us it's a headphone, it's a bass booster? Does it have bass boosting in it? Because if it doesn't, then it doesn't have any more bass than what was there to begin with. Okay, so stop saying about how much bass it has, because that's one of those things that you're talking about, where people believe they're gonna get a DAC and it's gonna get more bass, and you're gonna hear more stuff.
Some of them do because they're purposely not linear.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's the case, then guess what? I no longer think that this is a good buy. But that's the only thing. If it's a straight DAC, because like I said a couple of weeks ago, DACs are a mature technology. This is not something we need to mess with that much. We're all kind of figured out DACs by now. But noise floor can be an issue, and if you need to combat that, a DAC is a perfect way to do it. But if you're buying a DAC and you're like, oh my god, the bass is so much stronger now, you just bought a DAC with an EQ, and if you didn't want an EQ, I think that you should know up front that there's an EQ in there. That's all. So, there you go.
Agreed.
Jason. Almost a couple of months ago, he was looking for surround speakers. He has Axiom Tower fronts with Paradigm Center and the Klipsch hand-me-downs. He was using, I guess those were the rears, weren't cutting it. So Rob suggested the Energy CB10s, but Jason waited too long and couldn't get them for the price he wanted. So he ended up checking Axiom's refurbished section and found a pair of QS8s in scratch and dent condition for $300. He is absolutely thrilled with their sound, and the blemishes were minor. They even looked worse in Axiom pictures than in person. So just another reminder that refurbished and B-stock items can be a great way to save money. And I think it bears repeating here that a lot of times we're talking about accessories for less in some of these other websites. You can go to the manufacturer's websites, and a lot of times they'll have that B-stock link. I was just on Outlaw Audio, and they have a B-stock link. And hey, give me scratch and dent any day of the week and twice on Sundays, because a lot of times who even cares? You don't see it. It's in a dark room. Who cares? You know?
Yeah, I mean, my ATI amplifier that I bought was B stock. ATI has their own website just for their B stock stuff that's called classicaudioparts.com. And yeah, it had a blemish on the bottom right next to one of the screw holes where it looks like somebody went to, put in the screw and maybe nicked the case a little bit. Like,
Nice.
oh yeah, that is, there's. I was fine with saving like $1,200 because of that. It's on the bottom. It's on the bottom. When am I
Yeah.
looking at the bottom of my amplifier while watching a movie or listening to music? So yeah, like he says, oftentimes these blemishes that give you these huge discounts are like really, really minor and nothing to
See,
worry about. So
my
totally
wife
worth
always
checking.
says, I'd rather buy something that I'd rather save money and let somebody scratch something for me than
Hmm.
spend all the money so I could scratch it myself. Because that's what ends up happening,
Yeah.
right? That's just what ends up happening. Just like, and that's why we'll never buy another new car. We bought a new car, and then the first time it got scratched, we were like, God, scratch the new car, and it was a big deal. And then afterwards, we're like, well, no, why did I spend all this money just so that I could scratch it myself? So I agree, Jason. You're right. I'm telling you, I am. I am working on my wife. I talked a couple of weeks back, or maybe a couple of months back, about the fact that we're doing the Dave Ramsey thing, which is a way of getting out of debt, and we're about to finish it, which means that I'm about to be able to start spending money on things again. And I've got my eye on a new receiver, so I'm going to be upgrading my receiver pretty soon. I'm, I hope the wife doesn't listen to this podcast because she doesn't know that yet. But I will be angling for it. I'm going to start my psychological warfare very soon. All right,
Let's see how
Carlos.
quickly we can do these lists.
Yes, Carlos. Let's look here. He wants us to list our favorite speakers. I guess he says 5 of our favorite speakers.
Yeah.
He'd like the list to include different price points if possible. He'd like to update the list regularly, maybe monthly, so that AV Rant listeners can know which speakers we like our best ourselves. Oh, and subwoofers too. Subwoofers are easy because I like cheap. Okay, and there's not a lot out there, and we've talked about them so much that we could. I think there's 5 of them, right? So we've got, well, it's actually like 3, but they sometimes have different nameplates. So SVS, obviously, we talk about them all the time. HSU, obviously, we talk about them all the time. Outlaw, obviously, because HSU makes them, and we talk about HSU all the time, right? And then Rhythmic, right?
Yep.
Is that it? That's them, right? Those are the ones that we
JL Audio
recommend.
if you've got tons of money.
If you've got tons of money, you want something pretty, usually pretty and small, JL Audio. They're new subs. They're new small ones
Yep.
that are basically
The E
a
series.
driver-sized box. Aren't too. They're under $2,000, so
Yeah.
they're reasonably priced. We don't recommend them as much because because unless you're really stretched for space, you'll get a little bit bigger box from SVS, and you've got the SP 2000, and you saved $1,000. So it's
Yep.
hard to recommend that. Speakers.
Sure.
Well,
Want to bounce back and forth?
sure.
All right. Okay.
Go.
Well, I guess I'll start. I wanted to try and do ones that aren't like the ones I talk about all the time. So let's start with something really cheap. Let's start for like $240. And in that price range, I'm going to actually recommend the Vizio soundbar, their S4251W. 42 stands for how wide the soundbar is, and 51 stands for 5.1. It's a soundbar. It's got 3 speakers built into the soundbar up front and 2 wireless speakers that actually connect to the wireless subwoofer. So you have to kind of put the subwoofer towards the back of your room, and then the 2 speakers feed off of that. But for $240 off Amazon, it sounds surprisingly good. And if all you want to do is improve upon your TV's horrible, horrible sound quality, doesn't get much cheaper and easier than that. So that's my first one. Tom.
Oh, okay. I wasn't ready for that. Hold on. I'm trying to remember the name of these speakers that I've been using for my TV up front. I've been really impressed with them. They're a Harman Kardon, those little orb-looking speakers that we reviewed on Audioholics a while back.
Okay.
And I want to make sure I get the right name for them for you. I wanted the Nova. Is that what it is? The Nova, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yep, that's them. So these are $299 a pair. They're round. There's a video review from Andrew Gash over on Audioholics. So the Nova, they're Bluetooth speakers. They had NFC, which means all you have to do if you have a NFC-capable phone is put your phone up next to it, and it automatically pairs. You're supposed to be able to control them through an app. I've never gotten that to work. The front's got a tweeter and a woofer, and the back has a passive radiator. I guess it's a passive radiator. I don't know. Anyway, I don't remember what it is, but it goes in and out as well. And you can see inside it's sort of, they're round, but most of that space I don't think is being used. There's just a little conical space inside that, it looks like a black hole port looking thing. Anyways, they're $300 a pair. They have really, really worked out well for me. They've got a headphone output. They've got an optical in. You can connect them, obviously via Bluetooth. But I've been absolutely amazed by the imaging of these things. They look really cool. People like the way they look, but the imaging, there has been more than once that I've thought sounds were coming from behind me, and that was where they were supposed to be. And I was surprised that that was what was going on. And they're not optimally placed. Like they're always getting bumped because they're on the floor, so they're a little skew and stuff like that. But they're kind of angled up anyways a little bit. I think they're pretty good little speakers for $300. I have no problems recommending those. They're a good kind of all-around speaker, and you can do a bunch of stuff with them. The only thing I really don't like is the capacitive. They have capacitive touch controls, and so they don't work all that. It's a pain in the butt to get them to turn on something. They usually detect the signal coming in and they turn on themselves, but they don't often. And then basically you're supposed to run your finger along the top to get the volume to go up and down.
Oh yeah.
And that doesn't work. I mean, it works. It does it. It's just it's sort of random. I don't really know what's going on with that thing. But pretty good little speakers.
Okay, I am going to stay in the low price range for the second one. I'm going to recommend the Onkyo SKS HT540 package. It's actually 7 speakers and a little 10-inch subwoofer. I've recommended this thing for years. It is a really old speaker system that Onkyo's been selling for years and years and years. You can get it for $300 these days. Normally it's about $400, but Amazon's got the price of about $300. 7 speakers and a little sub, and honestly, okay, these speakers are bigger than you might anticipate, even by just looking at the photos. They're quite a bit bigger than your normal teeny tiny little things that you might find in this price range. The subwoofer, for being an extremely inexpensive 10-inch little sub, I mean, I always smile when I hear that thing because it plays its heart out, and it doesn't produce just one note like a lot of home theater in a box subs do. It's actually kind of decent for, keeping in mind the price that you're paying for this thing. So I really like that package. If you're looking for a low-priced, genuinely 7 separate speakers and a sub, I don't think you can do a whole lot better.
How much was that?
About $300 on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to beat that.
SKS
All right.
HD540s.
I'm going to recommend in the small speaker category, small bookshelf speaker category, the Super Zero 2.1s. These are from NHT. Now hear this. They're $100 a pop, so they're very easy to buy and to expand. You can start with 2. Get yourself a sub, and then slowly work your way into a full 5.1 or 7.1 or 9.1. I mean, they're so small that you can hang them from your ceiling. They have a little threaded insert on the back. They're small. They're sealed. They sound great. For $100, they have been the go-to recommendation for many, many people. And I only heard them recently, and when I did, I was like, "Yep, I can see why." You get a lot of sound out of a very small speaker. And I think they did really well with these. And so, if you want to, for less than $1,000, you can get yourself a nice one of the new SVS subs. Have a sub that you're going to be able to live with for the rest of your life. Get 2 of these bad boys to start with, and then you can either migrate these around to surround these when you get bigger speakers, or you can just chuck them into an office with a little amp. And you'll have amazing sound in your office at that point. So I'm a big fan of these speakers.
Cool. So for my third one, I'm going quite a bit higher in price, and of course I'll just quickly mention, yes, of course I recommend the Pioneer Andrew Jones Generation 2 speakers that we talk about all the time, and of course I recommend Ascend Acoustics. I really like their SE series for slightly lower price ranges, and then their Sierra series for higher price ranges. But like I said, I want to go off my beaten path a little bit. So one of the ones I like for a lifestyle speaker. This is something that's skinny and attractive, and a svelte speaker that you can easily hang on a wall or put up beside your flat panel TV, and it'll blend in really nicely. These would be the Revel Concerta on-wall speakers. Now these go for about $500 each. That's the larger ones, the M10s and the C10, and they are not worth that amount of money. That is some severe markup going there. But you can you can quite often find them for less, more closer to $300 or $350 each. That is not uncommon at all. And at that price, not too bad, in terms of what you're getting. They cannot play exceedingly loud. They are, just limited by the laws of physics and how small they are. And they do need to be crossed over at about 110, 120 hertz. So they need a higher crossover frequency. But the thing I really like about these, I looked at a lot of on-wall speakers, ones that were small, could easily hide behind a projection screen or, go on a wall beside a flat panel. And so many of them, the center channel, the center speaker, was literally just the left or right turned horizontally. And all of those types sound horrible because they've got the tweeters sandwiched in between, usually a couple of tiny little woofers. And as soon as you move slightly to the left or the right, you get, a lot of lobing or comb filtering, and it just doesn't sound right. Well, Revel made a good decision. They did a simple little trick, which was they do have two woofers to the left of the tweeter, two woofers to the right of the tweeter in their C10 center, but the two on the left only play the lowest frequencies below like 300 hertz. So they're only playing a small portion, and then the two on the right play all of the mid-range. So it's basically a bookshelf speaker turned on its side, but it works. It gets rid of that horrible lobing that normally happens when you have a tweeter sandwiched in between the mid-range drivers. So for that reason alone, I like the center of these Revel Concerta on-walls, and I really like the looks. And if you can find them lower than their regular MSRP, they're a really nice-sounding speaker.
$500 a pair? Is that, or $500
No,
each?
$500 each. Well, they have ones that are $500 a pair, the little M8s, but they are teeny tiny. Teeny tiny, those ones.
I'm trying to. I didn't do my research on this, so I'm doing this on the fly. I'm trying to figure out what exactly I'm going to do for $1,000 a pair. $1,000 a pair is a pretty decent price point. The EMP techs, of course, would be well up there. I think they're what, $700, $800 a pair now, and those are pretty easy recommendation in that price point. If you're willing to bump up, I would consider looking at some of the bookshelves over at RBH. Same company, but some of the bookshelves over at the RBH, the 61 SERs, and I don't know what the price points on these are, but essentially anything that fits your size and price point from RBH is a pretty easy recommendation for me. Do they still have on-wall speakers? Because I wanted to recommend some on-wall speakers, and I think they got rid of them. They have in-walls, but they do not have on-walls anymore that I can see. They had some fantastic on-walls that we really, really liked back in the day. So I'm going to recommend RBH as a company. That's a pretty easy one for me. I've heard a lot of their stuff. The other thing that was kind of popping into my head about this price point was because I think you can get them, the Q series I was looking at, I reviewed from KEF. I was pretty impressed with their sound. I think that the Q900s, I think I mentioned this on the podcast, but I could see that the woofers were trying to play much lower than they actually could. There was movement there where there should have been no movement at frequencies where it wasn't going to do anything but make noise. I would recommend the Q series, but I would recommend something closer to a bookshelf. And if you're going to get the towers, make sure you cross them over at closer to 80 hertz than what you might think they might tell you to, like down at 20 or 30 or 40 or something like that. I would cross them over higher. But the Q series, I was really impressed with those speakers, and those are in that same sort of price range, because the 900s, I think that's the top of their line. I think that I think that each they're like $700 or $800 a piece, but as a pair you get them for less, and you have to like actually figure out what that is, because they don't tell you on the website, because they suck that way. There you go.
So since the $2,000, $2,500 per pair range is completely filled with the speakers we talk about all the time. I'm jumping way up in price for my fourth recommendation. I'm going up to the Magnapan 3.7s, which are $5,500 a pair, if you want to go all the way up to that kind of price range. But I like to recommend Magnapan because nothing else really sounds like Magnapan. Some of the electrostatics sound quite similar, a big planar driver, but a lot of them are actually quite a bit more expensive than what Magnapan offers in their Magna planar speakers. So I really like these 3.7s. I like the 1.7s as well. The entire driver is either a true ribbon for the tweeter side or a quasi ribbon for the mid-range and bass. And they're just a very unique sounding speaker. If you ever get the chance to go to a Magnapan dealer and listen to some of them in a demo or something like that, highly recommend it because you probably haven't heard anything else quite like that. So expensive, but worth hearing.
Yes. All right. I'm gonna do something similar, but this is gonna go way up in the price. I need to make sure that he's actually selling these speakers before he is. Okay. There they are. Woohoo! That's a different looking speaker than what I expected. So I'm going to go with David Jensen. Is somebody that I interviewed on this podcast a while back. His dad actually invented electrostats. Okay, he invented the driver. Okay, that is who we're dealing with here. He has electrostatic speakers as well. They're high end. I have not personally heard them, so I would recommend them, but I would recommend you listen to them first. Figure out the way to listen to them first. But I am impressed enough with him. Let's put it this way, all right? This guy making high-end electrostatic speakers and contacted me directly after listening to the podcast because he was so impressed that I was not willing to subscribe to all the BS that the audiophiles, nice. espouse. And that's the kind of guy that you're dealing with here. So yes, I haven't heard his speakers. Yes, he's got the pedigree that you could probably trust, but you would not be surprised if he was trying to sell you magic rocks at the same time. He's certainly not doing that. So he's got two speakers on his websites. Right now he's got two. He's got the Jensen, it looks like ZA 2.1. I'm not really sure what that is. It's a 38-inch tall speaker. It is $87.50 a pair. Direct or through dealers, so you can get them directly from him and then talk to him about it. But if you're that's a little bit out of your price range because you did say around $5,000. These right here are more of a bookshelf size. They're 17 inches tall. He's saying they're 30 hertz to 40 kilohertz for what that's worth, and they're about $4,500 a pair without the stands, and they look like bookshelf speakers. So. With a big electrostatic, it looks like what it's got, and I haven't done the full research on these because I just decided to look these up. They've got the full, like a nice big electrostatic panel up top with a woofer at the in the bottom third of the driver. So you're getting your mid-range and your tweeter from it looks like, I would guess you're getting all of your tweeter and some of your mid-range from the electrostatic panel and then the driver underneath. And the thing that I like about him is that he does not make the traditional electrostatic speaker where it is a dipole. That means the back is open and the speaker's going, the material is going in and out, and then you get the direct, and then you get the reflection off the back wall as well. People thought, oh, it's much more open, it's much more airy. It's like, shut up, that's all psychological. What it is it's just diffuse. And what he does is he puts a back box on his and controls those back reflections. So I'm very interested to hear these speakers. In fact, I'm going to contact him and see. Remind me to do that after this is over with, Rob. I want to contact him, see if he'll send me some of his. Yeah, I'm going to review these. I'm going to review those.
Cool. So going to not quite price no object, but going up as expensive as anything I would ever consider. I'm going to recommend Focal. I've definitely mentioned the brand before, and not their top-of-the-line Utopia series, which get insanely expensive into the several $100,000 per pair if you want to go that nuts with it, but their Focal Electra BE2 series, they start at about $5,000 a pair for the bookshelf models and go up to $13,000 a pair for their towers, but these are gorgeous. I mean, the cabinets are just gorgeous to look at aesthetically. These use beryllium tweeters, which, as far as dome tweeters go, it doesn't get much better than that. They make all their own woofers, extremely good internal damping. They're actually like a glass woofer that's got a foam sandwich in between it. They make them themselves in their factory in France and that. So some pretty cool technology that's going into them. They sound fantastic. Are they worth this kind of price just strictly on sound? No, I don't think so. I think you can definitely get like, $3,000 per pair of speakers that sound basically just as good. But in terms of if you want to go to a high-end store and you want to look at something that looks gorgeous and that's just what you want to do is spend that kind of money, I definitely highly recommend them. They're wonderful, wonderful speakers. Last one, Tom?
See, I already blew my high-end speaker wad with the RBHs, because the go-to would be any of their Status Acoustics line, which technically is a different line.
It's true. That's fair enough, man.
Yeah, I mean, I have never heard a better speaker than what they make at the top end there. I guess if we were gonna talk about the absolute top of the line thing I've ever experienced, it would be Inner Sounds. I think it was Inner Sounds was the name of the company. They may not even be around anymore. This is how long ago this was. That was a true electrostat. With the big, massive panel. I would never recommend you buy them, because they're basically headphones that you have to sit 20 feet away from. The sweet spot was so small, right, but it was such an amazing experience that I can't help but go back to it. RBH, I've heard they have like the T2 towers that you can see. They have a version of that goes into a cabinet, which Clint has, which sounds amazing. I've heard the actual T2s. And whatever they were called before they were called I guess the T30s are the anniversary. The T2s are the separate cabinets. The T30s are the one that's all in one cabinet. And of course, the one that I'm going to recommend are the ones that were the Decimos are now whatever they're calling this granite rock thing that they're making. I've heard it. It's phenomenal.
Right.
It is some of the clearest, most pristine sound I've ever heard. It's supremely expensive, but as far as sound goes, it really doesn't get much better. Now, I could recommend Gene speakers. I haven't technically heard Gene speakers, but I'm positive they're fantastic. Gene says they're fantastic. They measure fantastic. RBH made them, so I'm sure they're great. I would also be very curious, because we did have a listener who went and heard the Blade speakers from Kef. I'd be curious to see how those were, because when they first came out, I thought they were garbage. I mean, I just thought there was just no way. But I really have changed after hearing some Kef speakers and seeing how that technology is filtered down to their other stuff. I'm really rethinking my whole position on those Blades, and I view them more like a prototype car, where somebody says, let's just go crazy and make the best thing we possibly can, and they did, and now they sometimes sell it to people, and then they take that technology and put it into their more mass market stuff, which is what Ford and Toyota and all those companies do when they make these sort of these prototype cars. Is they're really trying to think outside the box to see what they can put into cars that we'll end up buying 5-10 years from now. So I kind of see it that way, as opposed to what I thought it was a publicity stunt, which is what we see a lot with these companies, where they're like, here's a gold-plated. I saw one that was 100% aircraft-grade aluminum. The entire speaker, it weighed like 700 pounds. I'm like, oh, come on. That's ridiculous. You need that. So.
All right. Well, we are already over an hour, so let us race through Jared's request for demo material. Let's do like a back and forth again. What do you want to do? Like 5 just off the top of our heads, super quick, and then
since I have literally not been in the home theater in like 6 months. Or actually, my mom told me the other day it's been almost 4 since I've been in my home theater. So yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Oh, my something old.
So the first disc I always reach for whenever I'm demoing is Chris Body in Boston on Blu-ray. It sounds fantastic. Pretty much any track sounds great. I love that disc, just in terms of the sound quality of it. So that's my first thing I reach for, and I'll play anything off of that. That's my first thing.
I usually reach for, it depends on who I'm with, but I usually go myself for Porcupine Tree.
Mm-hmm.
In Absentia or is it Dead Wing or Dead? I think it's Dead Wing. Uh, those are both. They have some fantastic stuff on it. I haven't got the new one yet, but yeah, they've just got some fantastic surround sound effects and pans, and of course it's the music. I like the music, so it's got a lot going for it. That's my first one.
Alrighty. Next one I reach for is usually Avengers in 3D. Go right to the gigantic attack on New York scene. And there's actually one nice, cool part where there's a sound that circles completely around the room during that scene. There's one sound that pans right around. So since I have my front wide speakers in place that almost no one else on Earth has, I like that scene because you can actually listen to the sound go right around and through that front wide speaker and into the surround and surround back and out the left. And yeah, I like that scene.
I'm gonna cheat on this one. I have a lot of different little demo discs,
Mm-hmm.
and I have I like when Dolby and DTS came out with True HD and Master Audio, they gave out discs at CES. Of course, THX almost always has a demo disc out and about. But there is a disc that you can download yourself and burn to your Blu-ray yourself. I don't know if it's still available, but it was a year or so ago over at AVS. Good luck finding it because I don't know the deal with it where it is. But one of our listeners, I think it was Will actually, burned it for me. No, it wasn't Will. It was another guy. I don't want to mention him unless I get his permission. But he burned a disc of it for me, and it's got like just snippets of different scenes, and they're all kind of like, oh, this one's got, this is for surround effects, this is for low bass, this is for that sort of thing. So they'll have like. That Denzel Washington movie, where I don't want to give anything away, but it's like a post-apocalyptic, and he's running around with crappy headphones and the iPod, and trying to get a book back, the book of something.
Oh, Book of Eli, yeah.
Yeah. So where there's in that house, and there's a firefight, and there's just bullets everywhere. That's a good scene that's on there. My personal one for surround sound, maybe I'll just go with this as opposed to all these other ones, is the Doc Ock scene in Spider-Man 2.
Oh, yeah.
That's great for surround sound. There's stuff coming from all around you, and it's very specific. There's not panning, but it's very specific. So that's one of the ones I go for.
Yeah, right on those same lines for discrete surround effects. Gravity, also for 3D, since I am a fan of 3D and I'd like to show it off since almost nobody is actually using 3D. And, sometimes people are like, oh, that actually is kind of cool. I'd never pay the money to do it in my own place, but it is kind of cool. So, yeah, Gravity in 3D, fantastic demo disc. Mainly the scenes where you can actually hear Mission Control talking to them in their helmets, and the voices actually come from behind you and above you and all around you, and that in very discrete sound. And this is one of those perfect demonstrations of when you can actually have a perfect timbre match in your surrounds. It's kind of nice and cool because then the voice remains very consistent no matter what direction it's coming from. So that's a great demo disc.
It is for you. Everybody else is going, I hate that one.
That's right.
Let's see. I guess for just pure visceral excitement, it's hard for me to get away from the Oliphant scene in Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Just for pure bone crushing, but I'm gonna go ahead and go with Pacific Rim. Just skip all that talking and go straight to the fighting, which is what you should have done in the first place. So just for pure bass and lots of, because it's not just bass. There's also lots of high-end information from things getting clanging off of each other and stuff like that. So what I find is that in some theaters, that high-end stuff will be really fatiguing if you have distortion up high. So I listen a little bit for that, as well as just enjoying how things are bouncing off the tables at the same time.
So I have one that I think is kind of cool, which is The Shining. Stanley Kubrick, Jack Nicholson, famous one. I actually have the HD DVD version, but you can get it on Blu-ray. The reason I like this as a demo disc is because of the colors. The colors on it are really almost sort of muted, almost desaturated, and I love using this as an example of why you need to get your display calibrated. Because when I put on The Shining, and most people know The Shining but haven't seen it in ages.
Yeah.
And when you see it in high def on Blu-ray or HD DVD on a calibrated display, it it's really striking. It's hard to describe because the colors are desaturated and almost kind of muted, but it's really striking how really natural and oh gosh, it gives you an emotional response just in the way that it looks. And if you like, what I like to do is then turn my display to dynamic mode or something like that, which is what a lot of people are using. And you look at it there and you go, oh, that just looks awful. Like it completely robs the feeling of the movie when you don't see it displayed properly. So that's like one of my favorite ones for why you need your display calibrated demo material.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good video one because the video stuff, a lot of times I'll use something that's just got a lot of dark in it, and just to show off contrast and that sort of thing. So I might use something like The Descent, which has got a lot of very
I like that movie.
I love that movie. A lot of oversaturated colors, like lots of especially at the end, lots of really really deep reds and stuff in fields of black. You know what I mean? Where if you're having macro blocking issues or any sort of issues like that, I mean, you can really even see stuff like HDMI cable artifacts will show up really clearly in that movie because there's so many just stark. I mean, some of the worst climbing in the world I've ever seen. It's like, oh, who climbs like that? Idiots, dude.
People who get trapped in an underground cave.
Yeah, that's right. People get eaten. That's who. Yeah, I usually use that movie for black levels and just looking for artifacts within a display.
So my last one I'll mention, it's not even out yet, but this will be demo material. Transformers: Age of Extinction.
What?
Which is not a good movie in any way, shape, or form. However, when Lockdown first attacks the people and he is setting off his crazy bomb turn all living matter into metal destroyer weapon thingy that he has, when that thing goes off, that is the craziest bass I have ever heard. So that is a demo right there. I mean, they put it in the movie to be a demo. Like, there's no reason why that scene had to go on for as long as it did. It was just so they could blast you with sub 20 hertz bass for like a solid minute and a half. So that's a demo scene right there for bass lovers.
God, that's
it will be done.
That's hard to see. I wish I had some stuff that was a little bit more recent, but I really haven't watched much in my theater that was recent. Like, I think the last couple of movies I've seen in here were, Thor, the Dark. Whatever the Dark World.
The Dark World.
And I think the new Superman movie was the last thing I saw in here, the newish crappyish one, which I'm sure that last scene would have been awesome in there too. But I'm going to go old school on this one and just say I'm still having a hard time finding some place where I can really easily queue up stuff as easily as I can queue up for low bass. And at the same time, be able to entertain my kids. Finding Nemo. When the submarine comes down at you, and of course the tap scene. I am less impressed with the tap scene because it's just one quick note that kind of reverberates a little bit. But when that submarine comes down at you, that's insane. I mean, I've just been sitting in there and literally could feel my stomach shaking within the layers of blubber around it. But yeah, I could feel my stomach shaking in there. That's with that. So I'll go with that, I suppose. That's a good one. I'd like to say The Incredibles, but whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So I will suggest that maybe we actually kind of bump David F., even though he was the first discussion topic on the list, because it is that article by John Watkinson
we can't
about
do that right now.
I think maybe we'll bump that for next week, because that's a whole discussion thing, and get to the actual questions, because we want to answer questions. So
yeah. I guess we're about an hour and a half into this thing at this point.
We are.
All right,
Sorry.
Gary, we've mentioned HDCP, which is high definition copy protection. This is the newest one. It's called 2.2. That's the version 2.2. We talked about it a number of times. We've mostly said that how it's kind of got spotty rollout right now. It's you can either get the new HDMI 2.0, I guess it's 2.0 connection, or you get it with the HDCP 2.2. You can't. It's hard to get both of them right now. So Gary's question is, what's the deal with this, and what formats or products will make use of it? Well, the products that will make use of it will be coming out in the not this iteration, but I think for the most part, the next year's stuff will be the stuff where we'll be seeing, like the 2015 stuff or maybe late 2014 stuff, will have the HDCP 2.2. Rob will tell you about the color and all the other stuff, but
Well,
basically,
not on the copy protection side. I mean,
nothing.
it's yeah, I mean, really, this is for whatever future 4K formats will be coming. Whether that's going to be some kind of optical disc, whether it's a new version of Blu-ray, which is under proposal right now, but nothing is really firm at this point. So it's going to be that. If we ever have UHD cable boxes, satellite boxes, that type of thing, they'll likely be using that because this is the copy protection side of it. So they're worried that someone is going to connect some sort of recording device to the HDMI 2.0 output and copy the content that way, even though nobody copies content that way. But they're worried that someone will do it. So those are the products that are going to use it in terms of sources. I mean, as far as the AV receivers go, they just need to be able to handle it so that they can pass it through your...
Yeah, they need to be able to make that connection to whatever devices are connecting to them. So, the question you really should be asking is, if I get a new Blu-ray player that has HDCP 2.2 and I have an older receiver that doesn't, are they going to be able to communicate? Answer, we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they may make it so that they will, or they may require that you upgrade your receiver and everything else in the signal chain, which would suck. But they may do that because they are HDMI, and they have been known to suck on many occasions. So this would just be another one in a long line.
This isn't going to happen until new sources come, and I mean, it doesn't have to be 4K, it doesn't have to be ultra high definition, but that's really what it's going hand in hand with. So once those sources start to arrive, that's when HDCP 2.2 may or may not come into effect. Maybe they'll actually wise up and figure out that nobody is copying content that way. So we can cross our fingers and hope.
That's just so stupid. I hate it so much. All right, Ashley on Twitter asks about the F.LUX software for displays. Want to discuss the F.LUX software. What this does is it promises eye relief and a better-looking image for your computer or iDevice by dynamically changing the color temperature based on the time of day. Okay, so basically you kind of put it into the little software what time, or leak it up into your computer or whatever, so that it knows what time it is, and then as night comes, it dims and the colors change slightly. They slightly morph the colors, so it becomes a little bit easier on your eyes.
Yeah, it just gets redder. It turns to a warmer color temperature as the sun sets.
I'm gonna let Rob go first because I think everybody knows what I think about this. But go on, Rob.
Well, yeah, I actually found kind of a nice little review, quote-unquote, review of it over at PC World. And, I mean, they describe exactly what I would say about it, which is you don't want to use it when you're watching video. You don't want to use it when you're doing anything that's color important, like working on, print work or photos or anything like that. And, in fact, the latest versions of the software let you do things like turn it off for 2.5 hours while you're watching a movie, or just, turn it off altogether for whatever set period of time while you're working on anything that's important color-wise. So really what this is about is just trying to relieve eye strain. They're making these claims like, oh, if you're looking at a computer screen before you try to go to sleep, it delays your falling asleep by up to an hour and all these kinds of things. And, yeah...
Surely making something redder will stop that from happening.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the software is free. If you want to try it out, it can't really hurt anything. If you like that your screen gets redder and redder as the sun goes down, I mean, I don't know how many people are, their room is being lit by the sun and not by their interior lights. So, yeah, I don't see a whole lot of value in this software myself, but it's free, so you can try it, so whatever.
Yeah, luckily it's free, because if not, I'd really slam it. I really don't see any use for this whatsoever. I've got brightness. Like, the review I saw was like, well, those of you laptop guys might not think it's so cool, but, I've got a desktop, and it's really nice to have it, because it gives you, like, the ability to dim your display from your keyboard. I'm like, well, I can do that because I've got a laptop, and I guess that's some value there. But frankly, I've just never thought to myself, and I mean, I've experienced that where you turn on a display in the middle of the night, you've been sleeping
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, and you get up, you can't sleep, you decide to check your email or something, it like blares at you. I
Yep.
understand that. Never once did I think, oh my God, this is such an issue. Now I must find myself an app to fix this. It's never even crossed my mind. So if it's crossed your mind, it's free. I frankly think
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
really no point
honestly,
to this.
there's quite a few TVs you can buy that have, a little sensor on the front, a little
My
light
phone does
sensor.
that by itself. It doesn't need
Yep.
anything. You just
Yep.
turn it on. You
But
know,
when it comes to your TV, we always recommend you turn off that feature because you don't want your displays color. You certainly don't want the color temperature changing while you're watching anything. That is definitely a no-no. But I mean, you don't even really want the dynamics changing, just based on a little light sensor because it's not terribly accurate. So, yeah, we're not fans.
I'll tell you what, dude. The thing, let me tell you, I don't know how many times I've picked up my phone and had to wait for the brightness to adjust
Mm-hmm.
because I've gone outside, or where I've been holding the phone in such a way while I play a game that I'm covering like the rear camera or something, or I'm covering the whatever sensor it's using, and it goes dim on me. I'm just like,
Yep.
stop it. Stop doing that. So I'm absolutely positive that if I had that on my computer, I would turn it off because it would drive me nuts. Al wants us to talk about isobaric subwoofers. He also says he loves the podcast. I'd like to join one of our hangout parties someday. You're more than welcome, dude. Anytime, Al. Let's see here. So what is an isobaric subwoofer? We've kind of talked about these a little bit. We never really named them, mostly because I didn't know they had a name. I just thought they were called M&K subwoofers because that's the only place I've ever really seen them. But basically what they are is a subwoofer, or I guess it doesn't have to be a sub. We talk about them as subs, but
Yeah.
I've only ever really
Mhm.
seen them as subs. But I guess technically they don't
Mhm.
have to be. But if we think of this way, there's a driver, and then behind that driver, there's another driver, and the gap in between, the air is sealed in there. Okay, so there's the two drivers are in line, physically in line, so that the one behind it is facing the same direction as the one in front, right? So that,
Yep.
and then they're in phase, so that when one goes out, the other one goes out, and so that they're both going in and out at the same time. The idea here is to keep that air pressure between the front driver and the rear driver the same. The front driver is the one that's making the noise, that's making the sound. The rear driver is keeping the air pressure behind that first driver that's making the sound equal. It doesn't change because it's going in and out at the same time.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, this is a way of it's kind of like making a sealed subwoofer where the air pressure behind the driver does not change. So instead of the air in a sealed subwoofer ends up sort of acting like a spring, um, this one just keeps the pressure constant behind the driver that's actually making the sound without using a port. So there's no sound coming out of a port in this case. Yeah, so that's what an isobaric subwoofer is. I mean, the main reason that it tends to get used is because it gives you a little bit more headroom for the driver that's making the sound. There's claims that it can sort of make the frequency response more linear because it's not acting against that spring of air that it would have there if it were just a regular sealed driver. And so therefore you kind of have like slightly bigger than a sealed subwoofer, not as big as a ported one, don't need to have a port, but you get a little bit more output and a little bit flatter frequency response. Of course, the downside is the cost just went up because now you have two active drivers. Now you need double the amplifier power because you're actually powering both of them at the same time. So those are the downsides to it.
I
That's
don't really
sort of
see
the
how
pluses and
this thing,
minuses.
because most of these things are ported.
Mm-hmm.
They have that you can usually see like especially in M&K subs, you can see the bottom of the bottom driver.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I mean, there is sound that's coming out from the back of that second driver,
Yeah.
and it's going someplace. It's not going nowhere. So I really don't understand. And I hear and I understand the arguments and stuff, but it sounds to me like all you've done is add a driver to fix a problem that you didn't really have. because if you have a port, the air pressure on either, I mean, the air pressure behind is the same as air pressure in front. The problem is that the air compresses before as it's trying to come out the port. Well, if you
Yes.
design your port properly, then that's minimized, and therefore that's why you're not having that hissing or wheezing or chuffing or whatever sound you want to use to, or word you want to use to describe that sound. So there is some there's some benefits, but it seems so negligible compared to just designing a subwoofer better. You know, it, I
Yeah.
look at designs like these the same way I look at some of these high-end speaker designs. I'm like, and they'll go through and they'll tell you all the things or the reasons why they did this single driver in a humongous enclosure that's one big folded horn inside. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
listening to this entire thing. I'm thinking, this all has a sort of a sense to it. I kind of understand where you're coming from, but I also think you are fixing a problem that has already been fixed in other ways in speakers that cost a fraction of this and aren't nearly as big. And I think there's a reason why no one does it this way anymore. And that's what I think about these isobaric subwoofers. Now, do I think they're inherently bad? I don't think so. I think there's no reason why they can't sound fantastic. I just think there's probably a reason why nobody does them anymore. So, except for M&K, which apparently is holding on to it. Toby is looking for a new receiver. I didn't do much research on this, so you're gonna have to answer this one. Is buying new Toby? The way to get this question answered really, really well is to come to one of our hangouts afterwards, and then just say, "Hey, I'm looking for a new receiver. I was thinking about
Well,
this."
not everybody is available at 11 on Monday nights, so
Yeah, well, I don't
Eastern
care. I'm
time.
just telling you, the last person who did that ended up with a very good recommendation. I don't know if he ended up buying it or not, but he ended up with a very good recommendation. So, anyways, Toby's looking to replace his aging Denon AVR 3850. He's leaning towards the AVR X2000, and any reason that the slightly less expensive AVR E400 or some other model might be a better choice. Rob.
In my opinion, no. I think the X2000 is a fantastic choice myself. As far as comparing it to Denon's AVR E400, the X2000, and again here I'm looking at accessories for less prices where they're $20 apart. Um, so
Yeah, I'd go ahead and spend the extra $20 for whatever an
yeah.
X2000 is going to give you.
Yeah,
It's certainly going to be
the
something.
X2000 bumps you up in Odyssey. It gives you Odyssey Mult EQ XT, whereas the E400 is regular Mult EQ. Gives you an extra HDMI port, lets you do more stuff with more zones and things like that. So I mean, there's zero downside to going for it, and for $20, if you're getting it at accessories for less, that to me that's kind of a no-brainer. In terms of what is sort of new coming out from Denon, they've got their S series, which has replaced the E series. That was strictly about adding HDMI 2.0. It does not have HDCP 2.2. But HDMI 2.0 and adding wireless Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, that's what they added in the S series, but it's still sticking with regular multi-EQ from Odyssey. And then there is the new X2100, which is available for pre-order. But I mean, it's going to be like double the price when it's new versus the accessories for less price. And again, all that's been added there is HDMI 2.0 and wireless stuff. Pretty much all the features have remained the same. So in terms of this kind of price range, I don't personally have anything I'd be like, oh, you must buy something other than the X2000. I think that's a great choice. I think you'll be very happy with it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say too.
There you go.
I just didn't want to have to look up all those receivers. Jason found a motorized projection screen at a really low price. Let me just go back because I feel bad now I said that. Toby, if I were going to buy a receiver right now, because I was looking the other day for one for one of our listeners, and that X4000, it's like that is the one that is just calling my name. I really like that receiver. It's got everything I really want and or need. I don't need legacy connections, so all I really need is a bunch of HDMI inputs, and it's got the sub EQ, right? Isn't that's the one that has the sub EQ?
Sub EQ HD, multi EQ, XT32.
I want that receiver. yeah, that's the one I'm going to be angling for with the wife. I've got accessories for less on my brain for
But
that one.
Tom, you'd
So
be limited to a maximum of 9 speakers with that model. It won't go to 11. I mean, how will you live?
I
How
will, I
will
will,
you
I will
live?
power through somehow. I will power through. How? I don't know, but I'll do it. Jason is looking for a projection screen since he got the okay from his wife to get a front projector. Yay! He came across the Elite Screens VMAX 120 motorized roll-down screen at what seems to be an extreme. It doesn't seem to be at what is an extremely low price. Any reason to look for further? Now, I look. Do I have it open still? I think I have it open still here. Maybe not.
This is the price directly from Elite Screens, by the way. They have their Elite Screen shop, and this is 120-inch diagonal 16 by 9 screen, motorized roll down with regular matte white screen material. Price for that is $252.
That is redonkulously low.
I mean,
That is
that's a
so low.
motorized screen, man. So
That is
yeah,
cheaper than pull
yeah.
down. That's cheaper than pull down. That's cheaper
Hmm.
than fixed. That's cheaper
Yep.
than everything for 120. Now, if you look at the reviews on Amazon, which is where I went to go look for reviews, many people are just thrilled with it. Okay, but there are reports that there's some issues with the material. So some people are complaining about dimpling or some stripes and stuff, or maybe it's not as flat as it could be. Elite suggests that to at least one person to like weight it a little bit and
Yep.
see if that helped, and it didn't seem to help, and they weren't really happy with it. So you're taking a chance here, but for 200 and what is it, 50, $260?
$252.
Yeah, it's not much of a chance. And frankly, if it were me, I'd be like, as long as it's not awful, I will get over it. As long as it's not so bad, I would I would have no problems jumping on that. For 120 inches, that's insane.
Yeah, my one qualm with it is that it is not a tensioned screen.
Yeah, it's
It's just,
not.
it's
That's
just
true.
a screen just hanging there, being held down by the little bar that's on the bottom, and that's why they might suggest adding some weight to that bottom bar so that it's pulling down on the screen a little bit more. Try and get rid of any waves or wrinkles or little dimples in it that might happen. At 120 inches, that can definitely happen. So that's my one little qualm with it. I personally would prefer a screen that is tensioned. You'll see the ones that actually have sort of a like a pull cord on both sides of the screen that's stretching the screen out to keep it really nice and flat. But there's no way you're getting anywhere close to that price for a tensioned screen. So yeah, I mean, if this is the size you want, if you need a motorized screen, one of the other minor complaints is that it takes like 30 to 40 seconds to actually roll all the way down, which is kind of slow, and you could use a manual screen and pull it down in that same amount of time, but then you'd have to get up from your chair. Who wants to do that? Why not push a button on your remote and watch it come down from the ceiling for you? So yeah, I mean, the price definitely makes any little qualms about it much easier to overlook. Yeah, but it's not going to be the be all end all of screens, but yeah, hard, no way to
Right.
beat that price.
The other thing I would say too is that hanging that screen is not going to be as easy as it can be with other screens. I think you can only hang them from the end caps, which means you usually are going to have to end up mounting some sort of piece of wood or something. If you're going to put a baffle over it anyways or something to cover it up a little bit, then it's no big deal for you. But if it's something that you're probably going to end up having to like put like a piece of wood across a couple of joists, screw it into that, and then attach the screen to that piece of wood, unless you just so happen to hang it in such a way that it's going to be hanging right off of a rafter or a cross member there. So that's something to consider as well. All right. Doing okay. Okay. Raul, speaking of projectors, he wants a $500 projector to display an 80-inch image with a seating distance of about 12 feet. He lives in Mexico, and prices and availability are a lot worse in the States, so he's mostly considering either the Acer H6110BD or the Epson 730 HD. Okay, the Acer is a 1080p, while the Epson is 720p, so he's wondering for his screen size and distance, will the difference in resolution be a big deal? 80 inches. The Acer is DLP with a 2-times speed color wheel. The Epson is an LCD with reportedly worse black levels in contrast. Is there a clear winner? So, let's start with those two questions. I guess the Acer must be cheaper, right? Is the Acer
No,
cheaper?
actually, the Acer is a little bit more expensive than the Epson
Okay.
in this case. Yeah, where
Okay.
he is anyway.
Right. So, okay. So, forgetting the resolution, let's just talk about the LCD versus DLP, and the black levels and contrast. What we're always worried about here is black levels and contrast.
Hmm.
We're more concerned with that than anything else because that's what gives you such a the best picture is having the best black levels and the best contrast. Uh, if the Epson has got worse, the problem with the Acer that he's worried about is the rainbow effect. And what this is with DLPs, especially with these slower DLPs, because he's got a 2 times speed color wheel, you can sometimes see what looks like rainbows going across your images. Okay, and I've actually never seen it. I've seen some slower ones. I don't know exactly what the speeds are that I've seen, but it's never been an issue with me.
Yeah, I've only ever seen rainbows myself on a 1 times speed color wheel. These were like the first DLP displays that were ever made. And there I saw what is supposed to be like a scrolling white image sort of break up into individual colors as it was scrolling along the black screen there. So that was disconcerting. But honestly, for me, from 2 times speed on up, I don't see it. So I'm not prone to seeing the rainbow effect, and not everyone is. But some people are really, really prone to seeing it. So there's basically 3 kinds of people: people who don't see the rainbow effect, people who can see it and don't care, and people who see it and care a lot. So you sort of have to discover which group you fall into. But I mean, just in terms of between the Acer and the Epson, I wouldn't worry about the resolution at all in this case. 12 feet away from an 80-foot screen, I'm not going to worry about 1080p versus 720p. That is like the least of my concerns
Yeah, I agree.
among these. I care a lot more about the contrast and black levels. I care about the color accuracy, and by all reports, the Epson is actually a little bit more accurate in its colors, but the Acer's not so far off that you're really going to be worrying about it unless you're comparing it to another display. So yeah, I mean, I'd be leaning towards the Acer in this case. Oftentimes I'll talk about like a lot of the LCD projectors will have lens shift, whereas the DLP projectors won't, and that's a really huge benefit, in my opinion, because you can set the projector in a slightly off center, maybe not as high or as low as would be optimal, but then you can use lens shift to get it perfectly squared up on your screen without resorting to tilting or rotating the projector and then having sort of a trapezoidal image, which you can somewhat correct for with digital keystone correction, but then you're scaling the image and altering the resolution, neither of which you want to do. So I really like lens shift, but it doesn't come at these price points in this sort of $500 price range. The Epson is an LCD, but it doesn't have lens shift. So there's no advantages there. They both have the same zoom range, which is only a 1.2 times zoom. So it's a short zoom range, but at least you have a little. So yeah, when setup isn't any different, they're both about equally as noisy, both about equally as bright. I've got to lean towards the Acer just for having better black levels and higher contrast.
Yeah, it's you see, I can empathize with him being worried about this rainbow effect, especially at this price point and with this kind of older technology. He did find a test pattern that you can download, and we'll put a link up for that, which basically has a black field with white blocks going across it and white stripes going across it, and this is going to help him. If you can put that up on that projector, figure out which one, whether or not he's susceptible to this rainbow effect. Now, what I would suggest before you do that is get it, watch it for pawn the movie and watch it for a bit and see if you see anything. Then, if you don't, and you're still concerned, then you could put the test pattern on. But if I were
Hmm.
you and I didn't, I would just leave Sleeping Dog's Life, because God forbid you train yourself to see it, and then you'll be
Right.
screwed. Okay. Now, of course, if you're going to do this, you got to buy it from someplace you got a good return policy, or at least someplace where you can go and say, okay, well, I'm not buying this if I can't test it, and make sure it's not going to be something that bothers me. So they have to have some way of you doing it, and in a well lit room, or on the show floor is not it. It has to
Hmm.
be some sort of, actual testing place, or like a mock theater where they can turn down the lights and everything else. And then you have to bring your test pattern with you too. But yeah, I'd be leaning in that direction. I agree with Rob. I think the black levels, even though I like Epson projectors, and I would be hesitant to suggest something that is known to have worse black levels in contrast, because as much as rainbow effect will drive you crazy, macro blocking in blacks drives me up the wall. Seeing all those artifacts
Yeah.
and blacks just absolutely turns my
Yeah,
stomach.
as far as other test material for seeing if you are prone to seeing the rainbow effect or not, just the scrolling credits at the end of any movie, just the white credits going up on a black background, that's usually you'll spot it there if you're going to spot it anywhere.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that's pretty easy.
Yeah. Cesar, Cesar has pointed out, reminded us. I got the same email he did and laughed at it and pressed delete. But Cesar reminded us that Emotiva finally is shipping their XMC-1 surround sound pre-pro. This is only shipping to people who have pre-ordered it. All of you guys.
Up to 6 years ago, since that's when it was first announced.
6 years.
Yep.
That's a month.
6 years.
Okay, so there are some people that are posting up on websites that they have actually received them. So the question is, are we excited? I'm not particularly excited. I mean, it's just does nothing for me. I love Emotiva, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I'm excited to see what happens. How about that? I'm excited to see what happens with this thing, because their last processor was problematic.
Well, no. Their last processor, which was the UMC-200, was not too bad. It was the UMC-1, which was their first processor. That thing was a nightmare. So yeah. Okay, this XMC-1, I could do nothing but shake my head and laugh, because the people who have got it are reporting, and Emotiva has confirmed this, the Dirac automatic room correction system that they've been hyping up so much, because nothing anywhere close to this $2,000 price point that they're selling the XMC-1 for, nothing even close to that price point is using Dirac. The system that they're trying to set up, actually what you have to do is your XMC-1 has to be connected to the internet, because it's actually uploading the data that it will measure from the microphone to Dirac, and they're using their servers and processors to crunch the data and then send the correction files back to you, because that processing power isn't available inside the XMC-1 itself. It has to go out to the cloud and be done by an outboard server. Well, here's the thing. That Dirac software that they've been hyping so much, which is like the key reason why a lot of people wanted it, it's not on board. The people who are getting their XMC-1s, there's no Dirac. Now, Emotiva is saying, they're promising, and we know how much their promises are worth when it comes to processors. They're promising it'll be here within 60 days, that there'll be a firmware update, and your Dirac will be here within 60 days.
Well, it doesn't totally surprise me. I mean, these are like almost pre-production models that are being sent out to these people. The fact that they've got anything, they're probably ecstatic about.
Yeah,
but
yeah, dude, 60 days in Emotiva promised land. That is what, another 6 years?
Let's see. Yeah, no, because 6 years was. I mean, I think I would multiply it. It'd be about a year, maybe less.
Yeah.
No, I think it'll be 60 days, if not less. To be honest with you, I think they're highly motivated to get this done. And then the minute that they've got it, then you will be seeing that's going to go from pre-orders to actual shipping on their website. Because right now it says that it's not shipping.
Still says coming soon. Yeah. I mean, the other thing to me is they were promoting that it was going to be the first processor on the market with full HDMI 2.0 support. That was one of the promises they made a number of months ago. Well, of course, since then, other processors have come out with HDMI 2.0, so they couldn't possibly claim it was going to be the first anymore. But it doesn't have HDMI 2.0. It's HDMI 1.4 that's on board. So that just never happened. And
firmware of that one too.
You can't do that, and it has no video processing on whatsoever. None. It doesn't scale. It doesn't translate analog into
it doesn't
digital.
have any analog video.
Yeah.
It's like a It's like well, at least from the video side, it's like a entry-level Denon receiver, which has
It's
nothing
a
but HDMI inputs and analog uh, audio inputs.
It's a pure
I don't even think.
switch, and it has two HDMI outputs, both of which are always active. You cannot deactivate one of those HDMI outputs, so it's just a passive switch that's in there. And like Tom pointed out before we were started recording, he's like, yeah, that's going to be fun if you have HDMI CEC active, because then it's going to be telling your second display to turn on whether you want it to or not. So
It
yeah.
does have digital audio inputs as well. It looks like
Oh yeah.
three each of the coax and opticals, and then one AES EUB, which is it looks
Yeah.
like an XLR connection, like a balanced connection. Yeah, but Rob's right. The thing that's gonna really irritate people if you do end up connecting two different displays is HDMI CEC, which is the control that HDMI has. And I actually use this a little bit in my room right now because I've got those little Harman Kardon speakers, got the TV, and I've got this Blu-ray player. While HDMI CEC is in, whenever I turn the Blu-ray player on, I got about a 50-50 chance of it turning the TV on and switching it to the right input. Okay, that's what HDMI CEC does. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen if you connect both of these HDMI outs to something, and you have HDMI CEC enabled on one of your devices. Every time you turn on your Blu-ray player, both your displays are going to pop on, or have that. It's a possibility that might happen. So
Anyway, yeah, people over on AVS are complaining it has dual independent subwoofer outputs, but apparently you can't do it the way that like sub-EQHT works, which is you can set the distances and levels for the two subwoofers independently, but then you also must EQ them independently. You can't set one EQ or send a mono signal to both of them if you set them up with different distances and levels, which is what you would want to do. So people are complaining about that, and apparently a couple of guys who brought it up on Emotiva's forum got banned from the forum for bringing it up.
Yeah.
So anyway, look,
it does say the XMC-1, and underneath it, if you look at the logo, it says Gen 2. I'm like, didn't it just come out? How do you get Generation 2 already?
Well, they're talking about the aesthetics. It's the black on black aesthetics as part of their Gen 2 line.
Oh, is that what it is?
But yeah, anyway, I also like Emotiva. I very much like their amplifiers. I think they're a terrific value. I personally would not touch the XMC-1 with a 10-foot pole. So I'm not excited for its release, but yeah, good luck to anyone who got one. Congratulations.
And maybe it's going to be fantastic. I don't know.
Coming to
I'm willing to, if they sent me one, I'd review it.
Sure.
But I'm surely not going to drop $2,000 on it. Sorry. That's it. All right. Nick, how much time do we have left? Are we bumping everybody else?
Pretty close, yeah. We got like 10 minutes, maybe.
All right. Can we get through Nick in 10 minutes?
Sure.
All right. All right. Nick says he's trying to figure out the least expensive way for him to listen to high-res audio downloads in his theater. He has an older Onkyo receiver, an Oppo BDP-83 Blu-ray player, which is an older Oppo Blu-ray player, but not a bad one by any stretch, but an older one, and a Roku 3. And he'd like to try out samples from iTracks and HD Tracks. What is the best course of action? Okay, let's do this fast. I suggest you upgrade your Oppo because the newer ones will do this.
Yes, they will.
And this older one won't. But Rob's got a cheaper solution than that, I think.
Yeah, that's a $500 solution if you want to go that way. Yeah, this is tricky. I mean, I wish I could tell you that one of your existing components was capable of doing this, but not really. None of these will do high-res audio. And the other thing is, a lot of iTracks, pretty much everything they sell is available in stereo and in 5.1. And I don't know if he only wants to listen in stereo or if he wants to check out the 5.1 high-res mixes. So here's the thing: if you only care about stereo, one nice thing to be able to do would be able to also take that with you portably and play it on the go using headphones. And so there are some apps for iPhone and Android, but the iPhone itself, its own internal DAC, down samples everything to 48 kilohertz anyway. Some Android phones don't. I know the HDCP-1 M8 is actually praised because it has quite a good high-resolution DAC built in. So in that case, all you'd need is an app that will play back high-resolution FLAC files, or some other format if that's what you're downloading. But if you want to get a separate player, I mentioned FiO last week as a brand. They have their X3 and their X5 high-resolution portable players, both of which are very nice, both of which can be connected digitally to your home theater system. They actually have a digital coax output right on them, and you can send 192 kilohertz 24-bit stereo sound that way. Using the decoding that's built into the FiO players. So that's like a $200 buy for the X3 or a $350 buy for the X5. You do have to add your own micro SD memory cards to that, though. They don't have memory built in. Well, the X3 has 8 gigabytes of memory built in. Might be enough for one track. A little
you
more
could
than
also,
that.
I mean, I'm just shooting from the hip here. He could also repurpose a older computer that he's got lying around too.
Yes.
That you could strip down and add a good audio card to, and
Yes.
then just put it into his home theater.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, playing it from your computer is the way I would say the majority of people who are listening, especially to the surround sound, the 5.1 high-resolution mixes, they're probably using a computer and using either an HDMI or a DisplayPort output if they want to send it digitally, or getting a better sound card that can do the digital to analog processing and send out analog connections. So yes, a computer will work. The Dune HD players, which are basically a Linux-built home theater PC that's already made. Those will do it. Some of the Popcorn Hour units, very similar idea. It's a Linux home theater PC, but those are all over $400, so that's not a cheaper solution. So the one I would actually recommend, and you'll have to be a little bit careful on this because I don't know the exact models right now in the current model year, but Panasonic, for a number of years now, Panasonic Blu-ray players have had the ability to decode and play back 5.1 FLAC up to 192 kilohertz 24-bit. And you can basically just put those music files onto a USB thumb drive and plug it into the USB port of those Panasonic Blu-ray players. This is going back a couple of years now. The DMP BD77 and 79. I know the 79 is still available, even though it's a couple of years old. Those ones could do it. And they're going for like $85. So that is probably your cheapest solution if you're looking for the cheapest one. Do be careful. Just double check. Look up the manuals for whatever particular Panasonic Blu-ray player model you might be looking at. The one complaint is that they don't do gapless playback, which is where there's no gap between tracks. If you're just listening to samples, that's not going to be a big deal. A lot of guys talk about Dark Side of the Moon. They want to make sure that's gapless because I guess they want to sync it up with Wizard of Oz and see if it all pans out or something like that. And if there's little gaps in between the tracks, then that won't work. But that's like the one complaint about it. So anyway, that's the least expensive solution I could find. So look at Panasonic Blu-ray.
Yeah, but you have to put stuff on a
check.
USB stick
You have to
make
put
that
stuff on a
work,
USB
too.
stick, yeah.
So that's been another thing to consider. So I don't know. If it were me, I would try to find a cheap computer or maybe repurpose one of your own and just strip it down because you don't need that much processing power to do this if you're not having it do anything else. Just think about that. All right, so we got to go fast. Do we have any specific brands of flat paintable adhesive on one side speaker wire that we would recommend? He needs about 10 or 20 feet on his ceiling for whole house audio, and the attic is a no-go. I have a hard time believing that you can't make this work somehow. Just, you know what I mean? There's certainly a way to punch a hole like near the corner, or near the edge, and then feed the wire in, and then paint the wire, with just regular old wire, plain rated wire, and then run them down the things. It's not. I just have a feeling. I mean, is he going for whole home audio? Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, he's doing whole home audio, and he only needs like 10 to 20 feet. He just has to get across his ceiling to the ceiling-mounted speakers.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I got a suggestion, which is Sewell. You can go to sewelldirect.com. They have flat, paintable, self-adhesive speaker wire called Ghost Wire. I'll put up the link on Facebook and in the show notes. Yeah, that's the one. It's not too expensive. What is it for a
About a
50-foot
dollar a
spool? It's
foot.
about $50. So yeah, it's about $1 a foot, which is not super cheap, but not outlandish by any means. Yeah, that's the one I'd recommend. It works.
Yeah,
Good
it's
enough.
only. It looks like it's. Ooh, I think it's. Oh, that's four conductors. Somehow I switched. I
Uh,
think I think you have to buy 50 feet though. From at least from
yeah.
them, there's no 25-foot length, so
No,
you'll be
but I mean,
stuck with the whole
if he
thing.
needs two speakers, 20 feet each,
Yeah, but then he should
50
be
foot's
fine.
not
Yeah,
a
that's
bad
not
size.
bad, I suppose. I wonder
Yeah.
how he's gonna have to spend more for the termination though, because it's not terminated.
Yeah.
It's not something you can terminate yourself. So you need to use their terminations as well. So that's something to consider in the
Yeah, but they're
price.
like a couple of bucks. So
Is it?
yeah.
So last week we talked about placing acoustic treatments at the first reflection points on the back wall behind the listening area and on the front wall behind the front speakers. Why would putting front panels on the front wall behind the front speakers ever do anything, or is it just for rear-ported speakers? Well, it's not just for. It certainly helps rear-ported speakers more because there's sound being fired back at them through the port. But all speakers and in any room, sounds bouncing around anyways, are going to benefit from having the acoustic panels on the front walls to stop any sort of slap echo reflection, reflection from the speaker or from the room that's going around. That's why I like putting them back there. And it also helps, and the same thing with the first reflection points, it gives the illusion, at least to the speaker, because that sound's being absorbed, that the room is a little bit bigger than it actually is.
Yeah, Gene was actually talking about this on one of the Audioholics videos. I think it was when they were talking about Atmos speakers, and he was concerned about whether the reflecting sound off of the ceiling is going to work because all sounds up to about 400 hertz, which is higher than we normally talk about in terms of crossing things over to a subwoofer and that. But up to about 400 hertz, the sound waves are pretty omnidirectional coming out of a speaker just because the sound wavelengths themselves are long enough and wide enough that they will wrap around the body of the speaker and go out the back. The speaker driver is pushing the air out and then sucking it back in, and the wavelengths are long enough, it just wraps right around the speaker all the way up to about 400 hertz or so. So that's part of it, is just absorbing that back wave that's happening anyway in, the lower mid-range frequencies. But the main thing is just that sounds are reflecting around your room. They're reflecting off the back wall, the wall that's behind the listener, and then coming back up to the front wall and then coming back at you again. And what we're trying to eliminate with absorptive panels is the smearing of the sound. We were talking about that Haas effect a couple of weeks ago, where we don't perceive the location as having changed when a second sound reaches our ears within about 30 milliseconds of the original sound, but we perceive all of that, the original sound and the sound that arrived within 30 milliseconds, to all be one sound, which means that we just spread out that sound across 30 milliseconds where technically it's not supposed to exist. So that's what we're trying to do with these first reflection absorption and the front wall absorption, and that is get rid of that smearing of the sound where you're actually hearing a reflected sound that's arriving at your ear fast enough that you don't perceive it as an echo, but slow enough that it can actually sort of draw out that sound to be longer than it's supposed to be. So that's why it's effective.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point too, that to remember that the sound that wraps around. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, specifically because I remember back when I had a friend who was a DJ, and he used to talk about how uh, the music always sounded better from behind the speaker. And of course, he was using crappy DJ speakers back in the late 80s, so you can only imagine what quality they were and what kind of sound they were putting out and what kind of distortion was happening on the high end. Well, of course, it sounded better from behind. You were not hearing all that high end distortion being shrilly pointed directly at your face. So behind always sounded better to him.
And the
And
bass would have seemed louder from behind the speaker too.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot. There's a lot to kind of remember about these sorts of things, and so yeah, that's the way that these things wrap around, and that's why the shape of a speaker sometimes is so important, and why they consider the shape of the speaker so much. We don't no longer have these big wide boxes like we used to. They're now thinner. you know, and
Yeah.
usually they have like they have rounded edges as well.
Yeah,
All right.
as like Glenn Carras from Gick Acoustics, he'll often say, if you can't put the panels in the spots that we recommend, just having panels in the room, like literally anywhere in the room, can have an effect because it's just absorbing some of the echoes, some of the reverberation of the room.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you put it, it's absorbing some of that reverberant energy that isn't supposed to be there. So, yeah, it works.
Yup. All right. Once again, you can contact us at Tom at AVRant, Rob at AVRant. Come to the website, avrant.com, and comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. And feel free to join us for one of these podcast recording sessions on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And afterwards at what looks to be 11:15-ish for our Hangouts, which is when we'll probably get this next one started.
And for Eliezer and Travis and David, we will get to your questions next week. Sorry, we ran out of time, Matt Damon.
Yeah. David. Yep, David on Facebook. Okay. Yes, we will try to get your questions, and we will, I don't know. It's probably my fault that we went long. Anyways, for AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
And when I can find the podcast window, I will close this. Guys, we'll see you in a little bit.